Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 5, The Cause of All Causes, Text 42. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jana Jana Shalakaya Chakshuralamitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikan. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnav devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Pandit Srivas Thakur, and all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I pray that Shri Shri Radha Kalashanji, Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Gurudev use me as an instrument so that their message can flow through me to give me the words to serve the Vaishnavas listening. So as I said, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 5, The Cause of All Causes. We'll read from texts 33 to 42 and focus in on 42 first. So, please repeat. Purloka kalpita padpanyan. Bhuvarloka syanabhita. Swarloka kalpita murdana. Iti valoka kalpana. Please chant. Loka kalpita. Loka kalpito nam. Iti valoka kalpana. Burloka, the entire planetary system from Patala to the earthly planetary system. Kalpitaha, imagined. Padbhyam, situated on the legs. Bhuvarloka, the Bhuvarloka planetary system, Asya, of the universal form of the Lord, Nabitaha, out of the navel abdomen, Swarlokaha, the higher planetary system, beginning with the heavenly planets, Kalpitaha, imagined, Murdna, from the chest to the head, Iti, thus, Va, either, Loka, the planetary systems, Kalpana, imagination. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Others may divide the whole planetary system into 3 divisions, namely the lower planetary systems on the legs up to the earth, the middle planetary systems on the navel, and the upper planetary system, Swarloka, from the chest to the head of the Supreme Personality. Purport. The 3 divisions of the complete planetary systems are here mentioned. 14 are imagined by others, and that is also explained. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 2nd canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled The Cause of All Causes. So we'll go back and read text 33 to 42. Thus, when all these became assembled by force of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this universe certainly came into being by accepting both the primary and secondary causes of creation. Thus, all the universes remain thousands of eons within the water, the causal ocean, and the Lord of living beings entering in each of them caused them to be fully animated. The Lord, Mahavishnu, although lying in the causal ocean, came out of it and dividing himself as Hiranyagarbha, he entered into each universe and assumed the Virat Rupa with thousands of legs and arms, mouths and heads. Great philosophers imagine that the complete planetary system in the universe are displays of the different upper and lower limbs of the universal body of the Lord. The Brahmanas represent his mouth, the Kshatriyas his arms, the Vaishyas his thighs, and the Shudras are born of his legs. The lower planetary systems up to the limit of the earthly stratum are said to be situated in his legs. The middle planetary systems beginning from Bhuvarloka are situated in his navel, and the still higher planetary systems occupied by the demigods and highly cultured sages and saints are situated in the chest of the Supreme Lord. From the forefront of the chest up to the neck of the universal form of the Lord are situated the planetary systems named Janaloka and Tapaloka, whereas Satyaloka, the topmost planetary system, is situated on the head of the form. The spiritual planets are eternal. My dear son Narada, know from me that there are 7 lower planetary systems out of the total 14. The first planetary system, known as Atala, is situated on the waist. The second, Vitala, is situated on the thighs. The third, Sutala, on the knees. The fourth, Talatala, on the shanks. The fifth, Mahatala, on the ankles. The sixth, Rasatala, on the upper portion of the feet. And the 7th, Patala, on the soles of the feet. Thus, the Virat form of the Lord is full of all planetary systems. Others may divide the whole planetary system into 3 divisions, namely the lower planetary systems on the legs up to the earth, the middle planetary systems on the navel, and the upper planetary systems from the chest to the head of the Supreme Personality. So we have this description of creation and the universe. So, we know that Krishna first expands himself and he becomes Karanadakashayi Vishnu, also known as Mahavishnu. And then he forms the Mahat Tattva, the material sky, which contains the 16 principal ingredients. And then from his pores, innumerable universes are created, and he expands himself into each universe as the Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And that's who's being described here, is Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And then from his navel, Brahma is born. And then in each universe has its own Brahma, who creates using the principal ingredients according to the instructions given to him by Krishna, by God. And then Paramatma, or Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, enters into each atom, each living being and non-living being, right? So that's like the basics of creation described over and over again in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We actually also had this description of the planets in his legs in, let me see, Canto 2, Chapter 1, texts 26 to 39. And it's entitled, "The First Step in God Realization is Understanding This Form of the Lord, the universal form." So if it's saying it's the first step of God realization, it doesn't mean that it's the last step of God realization. And last week we were having a discussion of, whether we want to meditate on the universal form versus the personal form of Krishna that we see, the deities that we see all around. So my question to you is, why would we want to meditate on the universal form? So. Hello.
Well, this is one of my first third or fourth talks, but the meditating on the universal form could help feel like the oneness of everything, creation.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you for sharing.
Just a thought. As it said in Srimad Bhagavatam itself, Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavani. So brahmeti is the unmanifested form of Vyakta, right, of the Supreme Lord. How vast it is, as the name itself suggests, Virata Rupa. So that is the first understanding that we get from the universal form. And secondly, as is also enunciated by Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita, how he is addressing all of us through Arjuna to start practicing seeing Krishna through his energies everywhere, like when we, for example, we drink water, how Krishna is the taste of the water, So it's a kind of a tool to practice, to understand the truth in an unmanifested form.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes. So we have this vision of God, right? His vast form. It's described as like all the planets make up the different parts of his body, and then we even look at like the different varnas, like what class of human beings we can have are related to different parts of his body as well, showing that, a couple of things, that no matter what we're doing in our lives, like the varnas are kind of our dharma, what our occupations are, right? So it says, some see like the, what does it say here? The Brahmanas represent his mouth, the Kshatriya his arms, the Vaishya his thighs, the Shudra are born of his legs. So no matter what part we're playing in society, if we're leaders, advisors, educators, merchant, farmers, laborers, enforcers, all of these different roles, whatever we're doing, we can still bring that back to thinking about Krishna. Because if you're, a Brahmana and you're thinking, wow, like I represent the mouth of Krishna, and if you're a Shudra and you're thinking, I represent the legs of Krishna, right? So we can see that we represent different parts of a whole. and that we all fit together, right? So just that's one way that if we meditate on the universal form, that we can really understand our position in the world and how we relate to Krishna and have our relationship even that much deeper. And as you mentioned, Krishna describes how we can think of him every day, right? I'm the taste of water, I'm the intelligence of the intelligent, I'm the power of the powerful, right? All these things that we see around us. In the earlier chapter, he really goes into detail about the universal form, about how, even the different parts of his body make up different parts of earth, right? So if you see a river, you can think of like the river represents his waist. So you're thinking of Krishna's waist when you see a river running, right? So it's just another way for us to really think about Krishna all the time, which is our goal, right? Krishna says, remember me, whatever you do, whatever you offer, do it as an offering unto me, service to me. So we really are in that mood of wanting to think of Krishna. So Prabhupada has given us this personal form, the Mahamantra. It's a personal form of Krishna. And we've given instructions to that, we can meditate on this personal form, this form, and not the Virat form, this universal form. So, not that we're speculating, but we're discussing why would Prabhupada tell us to meditate on this personal form and not the universal form? Some thoughts? Repeat that in the...
Because Krishna is a person.
Because Krishna is a person. Do you want to expand on that?
Krishna has a beautiful Satchit Ananda, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchit Ananda Vigraha. So no doubt there are several controllers in this creation, but the supreme controller of all the controllers, Ishvara Parama Ishvara, Satchidananda, he has his beautiful Sat, eternity, Chit, full of knowledge, and Ananda, full of bliss form. So that's what Brahmaji is asking everyone to meditate on.
Very good. Any other thoughts? Do you have any thoughts about why we would want to meditate on the personal form? So the Supreme Personal Form is the cause of all other forms?
I guess because we're in a physical form, it helps to have that singular form of Krishna. That way we can relate to him and see him. Because it's interesting, we can feel Krishna inside and see it in the water, in the energy and stuff. There's knowing inside in your heart, and then there's knowing visually, so it feels like more concrete way.
Thank you, yes. That's a great example, a reason. Do you have anything to add?
I was actually, as you were talking, I was thinking that too, that Prabhupada gave us a process for this day and age. He simplified so many things for us, and it is so much simpler to meditate on a person who has feelings and different, it's much easier for us to connect with that and to visualize that in our minds than it is to just, if we were maybe just to be thinking of certain Sanskrit words over and over or trying to feel the vibrations in a room. It's much easier for us to connect in our hearts to the person of God.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As she said, it was a wonderful point. I remember Jesus Christ said, right, a man is made in the image of God. So if we have a form or father, that means it implies that our father has a form, so on and so forth. His father, so original father must have a form.
Very good. Yeah, so it helps us to understand the dichotomy of the vastness of the Virat Roop, this universal form, and then almost the minuteness of Krishna's original form, right? The form that we see playing in the fields with the cowherd boys and playing pranks and things like that, right? And we are better able to relate to Krishna in this personal form because we can understand personal relationships, we have personal relationships, and so we can understand that even more clearly when we think of Krishna in his original form, in his, form as a person and not as this universal form. As beginning bhaktas, as beginning devotees on this path of self-realization, it's also important for us to know that Krishna is this universal form as well. So it's like this balance we have to have, right? And it's exactly as you said, we can only relate if we can imagine. Like we can't, this universal form isn't imaginable in some sense, right? Like when Arjuna gazes upon it in the Bhagavad Gita, he's just like, awed, and only certain people were given that vision to see the universal form. So even though he was displaying it on the battlefield in front of thousands of soldiers, only Arjuna and Sanjaya were able to see it. It's his universal form. So some may say that, well, yeah, we meditate on the personal form because we can't understand the universal form. So the universal form is higher, right? And Prabhupada addresses this over and over again. I was actually listening to a lecture from my spiritual teacher, Tamal Krishna Goswami, who was quoting Prabhupada on this, and that he said that when we think of the universal form, because it's so vast and almost impersonal in a sense, that sometimes we're attracted to that because it allows us to maintain our attachments to the material world. It allows us to maintain our desires. So sometimes we say we want liberation, we want love of God, but we have this underlying attachment to our family, our wanting what we want, our desires. And if we're thinking about Krishna in his personal form, we can either easily let go of that attachment or feel extra guilty and shame for having that attachment. Either way, it's not a good feeling, right, if we're not ready to give it up. And so he was saying that sometimes we think we need to worship on the universal form because we want to maintain our attachments and desires. And Prabhupada has made the point over and over again that the original form of Krishna is who we really want to meditate to, who we connect to. Let's see. It was funny, I was looking up, where Prabhupada mentions these things and what verses and this, that, and I decided to see what ChatGPT would say about this topic. And it was really nice. It said that Srila Prabhupada's teachings emphasize that the personal form of Lord Krishna allows for a more intimate and relatable connection, making it easier for devotees to develop deep devotion and love for God. It goes on to say, Lord Krishna, as described in texts like the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, is seen as the most complete and intimate manifestation of the divine, making it easier for devotees to develop a deep and personal connection. And then it concludes by saying, Bhakti Yoga is the most accessible and effective means of attaining spiritual realization. Meditating on Lord Krishna and engaging in devotional activities, such as chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, are central to these practices. So I thought, this is really nice. ChatGPT kind of really was able to get the essence of what Prabhupada was teaching. Of course, we could probably expand on this answer. And, it does get a little repetitive, as ChatGPT can. But I thought that was really cool that like you can find this information. It wasn't able to specifically give me the verses, but we know in like chapter 10, Krishna, describes his universal form. In chapter 7, he describes how he's everything around us, right? And then in chapter 9, he says all of this, and he's like, just think of me, remember me, everything that you do, just remember me, right? So that's what we are striving to do as bhakti yogas, as bhakti yogis, as devotees of Krishna, is to think of him at every moment. And so we learn and understand about these different forms of Krishna because, one, we all have different natures, and so different things will attract us, right? Sometimes some people are more attracted to Lord Ram than they are Lord Krishna. Sometimes, I think I've heard from a lot of people that the first form that they were attracted to in coming to Krishna consciousness was Lord Nrsingadev, right? And I remember when I first laid eyes on Lord Nrsingadev, I just thought he was the most beautiful form that I've ever seen. And I didn't have this like fear. I just thought it was so amazing. And then you hear the story of him protecting his devotees, and you think, oh yeah, that's what I want, right? Because in this material world, there's danger at every step. And, if there's not danger, there's calamity, there's challenges. And Nrsingadev lets us, destroy those challenges. Just like he destroys Hiranyakashipu, we can do the same thing with that desires in our heart, right? He does that same thing. He just, vanquishes those desires. So that can be very scary because we've lived thousands and thousands of lifetimes with these desires, and giving them up can cause some fear and anxiety, as much as wanting to fulfill them and even getting them fulfilled causes fear and anxiety, right? Because we're in the material world that's full of challenges, right? So then we learn about Krishna, and we learn all these different forms so that we can really, when we meditate in our personal meditation of chanting the Maha Mantra, chanting japa, we can meditate on these different forms as we're listening and hearing. When we're sitting in kirtan, in the call and response singing that we do, that we can really meditate on this form, right? Sometimes it's so wonderful having kirtan in front of the deities because we can see Krishna and Radharani and have like an intimate connection. I've experienced this personally myself, and I've had other people relate experiences where they're sitting in kirtan and they are looking at Krishna and they have some sort of like moment where it only feels like it's just the three of us, right? The three of you. You're nodding. Do you want to share about an experience that you've had as such? I mean, don't feel pressured to, but it's always nice to hear.
I just wanted to ask, sometimes it happens when you sit for a...
It's on, just closer to your mouth.
So you sit for a kirtan or sound, you're hearing, you're seeing it a lot, and then tears start rolling down. So, what should that be considered as? It's like, I don't understand. It happens a few times, but then it's like, am I being too emotional, or is there something else that I'm feeling at that moment? I'm unable to contemplate.
So some questions you can ask yourself is, what are you feeling in that moment, right? Really delving into that. The other thing is that when we think of cleansing, of cleaning, we need water, right? And tears are a form of water. So it's cleansing of the heart. That's an external, right? And it could be many different things. Sometimes when I feel tears come, sometimes it comes from a place of guilt. Like, Srila Prabhupada and my Guru Tamal Krishna Goswami have sacrificed so much, right, for us. Prabhupada suffered 3 heart attacks on his way here. He spent so much of his time and energy translating the Srimad Bhagavatam for us that sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough to take advantage. So I can feel guilty from that. Or sometimes I just feel like so connected and grateful to Krishna and the gurus and the parampara and the Srimad Bhagavatam, all of these ways that we are connecting to Krishna that tears come, right? And it's not easy, even if it's tears of gratitude or tears of shame or tears of joy, feeling that level of emotion can be very hard, right? And so sometimes I think, oh, I don't want to have that connection right now because it's too intense, right? So it's one of those things that we really want to practice, is honoring our emotions even when they are too intense. And that's one of our pillars, is austerity, right? When we look at what that meaning is of not, when we say no intoxication, it's because we're practicing austerity. But what is part of that austerity is that we don't want to numb the emotions that we're feeling. We want to feel them. And so sometimes it's hard. We want to numb it with alcohol or food or TV or Facebook or so many number of things that we don't consider intoxication, but really are ways of numbing our emotions and not feeling the austerity of the world, right? And that austerity can even be joy. Sometimes it's painful to feel joy. We think, so many different reasons. So that could be one reason. Of course, everybody is different, and you have to really delve into your own heart and see why those tears come for you, right? Does anyone else have an experience they want to share of being in front of the deities and feeling a connection?
Tired, and so it was nice to just sit on the ground and kind of rest and gaze at the deities, because it's just the beauty for me. Like, there's so much to see there, and also like their expressions, especially for the female deity.
Radha,
like loving, yeah. Mm-hmm. And like sometimes I'll just stare or like gaze at her face, and I just see this pleasant like acceptance, and I feel like it's a very like heartwarming experience for me, especially today.
Thank you for sharing. Do you have any that you want to share?
Well, we have Krishna Balaram deities at home, and one day I was having a hard day, and I just started venting to Krishna Balaram, Krishna this, Krishna that, and I wasn't even really looking at him. I had to get ready for work, and I was walking around the house like complaining and ranting, and then I went to leave, and I threw my purse over my shoulder, and I looked at the deities, and I swore that Krishna was smiling so hard at me, like he was laughing at me, what came into my heart in that moment is I thought, you really were listening this whole time. Like we're told all the time to pray and that God is here in front of you, but do I always feel it? Do I always acknowledge it? No, but in that moment I felt, oh, I really do have that access, that he really is listening all the time whenever I want him to.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Do you have any experiences you want to share?
Not really, but I try to meditate like Srila Prabhupada's Gurudev, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said that famous statement. Don't try to see Krishna. Act in such a way that Krishna wants to see you. So I like to request the deities, please make me an instrument to act in such a way that you'd like to see me. Like, for example, Radha Swami, once he mentioned in his lectures, that Krishna in the deity form is most pleased when he sees, of course there are too many things, but this particular one thing he said, that you put everyone else in front of you, instead of trying to put yourself in the center. Of course we have to put Krishna in the center, but when you promote everyone else before you, then Krishna is really pleased in the deity form.
Thank you. Yes. So many wonderful realizations and stories. So I'll stop here and see if we have any questions or any additional comments. I think the battery must be dying.
But it was earlier, and I was. Krishna, wants to be kind to us and love us unconditionally. And when he comes in physical form, he's just like this all-loving being presence. I know you can be near him and just really love him. But we, as our form, are coming towards the love, but he is the love. So my question is, he might feel our pain if we're in pain, but does he suffer at least? Because we might experience suffering, but does Krishna experience suffering?
So the comment was made that I think the microphone kind of died, that, Krishna is all loving and, we may experience love, but Krishna is love. And that we understand that, he feels our love and he shares in our pain and joy. And the question is, if he shares in our pain, does he feel suffering? And it's a very good question. It's a very complicated question. The thought that comes to mind for me when I hear that question is that quote, I think it might be a Buddhist quote that says, pain is mandatory in the material world, but suffering is optional. So what that means is suffering is really a state of mind that we can learn to overcome, right? So we may be in pain, but we don't let that pain define us or change the way we think of the world or change the way we love other people. Like I always like to share that experience of being in the snowpocalypse here in Dallas where there was no power and it was so cold, right? And it was unbearable when I kept thinking about how cold it was. But when I stopped thinking about how cold it was and thought about all the people that were opening up their homes whenever they had electricity, sending out announcements, hey, I have electricity, please come over. When I thought about all the people that reached out to each other in the community, like I no longer was thinking of the discomfort I was feeling. Yes, it was still very cold, but it was no longer a source of suffering, right? A source of pain. So that's what we're trying to achieve, that no matter what's happening in the world, we're not experiencing that pain and that suffering in the same way. And so there's so many examples of that in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's so many examples of that. Even Prabhupada, even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, happiness, distress, cold, heat, these things are temporary, and the yogi is very indifferent to it, right? So that's what we're trying to achieve. It's not easy, but it does. We can get there by. There's certain things that we can do, practices that we can engage in, right? Like the big one I think of is a gratitude practice, because I think any moment that we are feeling bad or feeling sorry for ourselves or feeling upset, if we start to switch that into gratitude, about thinking about all the things that we're grateful for, then we can even think of why we're grateful for the challenges that we're undergoing, right? And that's like the heart of the prayers from Queen Kunti when she's, suffering so much from, the Pandavas and everything that they went through before the Bhagavad Gita Mahabharata, in the Mahabharata. She thanks Krishna for all the calamities because she said, at every moment, you were always there, and I thought of you at all those moments. So we can wallow in our pain and suffering, or we can hand them over to Krishna and understand that He's going to give us what we need to not feel the suffering as much. He's not going to necessarily take the pain away, but He's going to help us, with understanding and tools that we can use that make us indifferent to the pain, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes? Or comments? It's sorry, it doesn't work. Yeah. Wait, hold on one second. I'm going to repeat that for the people listening so it's not empty or silent for them for so long. So the point here was made that Krishna shows His universal form, and it's described in the Bhagavad Gita to establish His supremacy as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that those that don't have access to the most confidential knowledge can still understand that this is the Supreme Lord. And then when Arjuna is looking on the Supreme Lord form, the universal form, he sees Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva and Krishna in the center. And he thought that ever since his childhood, he was very much attracted to that vision of Krishna in the center and Krishna being the Supreme Lord. So continue. Yes, thank you. So, I'm trying to remember how you started. Oh yes, so you were saying that the comment was made that Srila Prabhupada has, instructed us to meditate on the personal form for many reasons, but one reason is that there's that personal connection, and that Right, the state of consciousness at the time of Death is what we attain to, that's the next life birth that we'll get into. So if we're thinking of Krishna, then we'll go to Krishna, Krishna Loka, right? Where Krishna is, eternally experiencing these pastimes. But if we're thinking of the universal form, I don't know, where would you go? In the material universe, yeah. So, again, that's another reason why we meditate on the personal form and not the universal form. So, thank you very much. I would say when you're chanting your personal meditation, your japa, really focus in on that personal form of Krishna. Whatever form you see, it could be of the deities, it could be of, Krishna playing with the gopis, or lifting Govardhan Hill, or playing with the gopas and eating, nice prasadam. So, yeah, that's what we can do as we're going through our day, is how are we thinking of Krishna all day long, but especially when we're meditating on Krishna. How are we meditating? Sometimes it's good to honor that first form of Krishna that comes to mind and meditate on that one. So I'll end here. Tarantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki